They ignored him. She stopped. Witness how a single act of kindness from a homeless woman transformed a billionaire, exposed corporate hypocrisy, and rebuilt a city. Blood ran down the boy's knees as sobs echoed on the empty sidewalk. No one stopped. No one looked. To the hurried passers-by in New York, a crying child was just another noise in the chaotic symphony of the city. But for Maria, even with hunger gnawing at her stomach for 2 days, that cry pierced through all her defenses. "Hey, little one, let me see that." Maria approached the boy, ignoring the suspicious glances of pedestrians. Her dark, calloused fingers contrasted with the boy's pale skin as she gently examined the bruise. With precise movements, she took a surprisingly clean handkerchief from her pocket, her only possession besides the clothes she wore, and pressed it against the wound. A few feet away, Mr. Richard Hayes watched the scene motionless, his hand instinctively clenching the $5,000 Italian leather briefcase. His son had run ahead, tripped, and now a homeless woman was touching him. His first impulse was to intervene, but something stopped him. Perhaps the delicacy of the woman's movements, or the way his son had stopped crying almost instantly. "What happened, champ?" Maria asked, tying the boy's loose shoelace. "Looks like you were in a hurry." "I just wanted to see the birds," he replied, pointing to the pigeons fighting over crumbs. "My name is Noah." Maria smiled, revealing a surprisingly perfect smile for someone who slept in crowded shelters when she was lucky, or under overpasses when she wasn't. "Nice to meet you, Noah. I'm Maria." A few feet away, Richard stood frozen. Normally, his security guards would have removed any undesirable person who approached his son. But today, he had dismissed the team to have a rare moment alone with Noah after 3 months traveling across 5 continents closing deals. "There you go," said Maria, finishing cleaning his knee. "It's nothing serious. Just be more careful, okay? Those sneakers are too nice to get scratched." That's when Noah innocently asked, "Why are you so dirty?" The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Richard felt his face burn with shame, ready to intervene, but Maria's response surprised him. "Because not everyone is as lucky in life, little one." She spoke without self-pity, just stating a fact. "Sometimes we lose our home, our job, our family. But we never lose our humanity. Remember that." Those words hit Richard like a punch. Just 32 days ago, during a board meeting, he had said that people on the streets chose to be there and that giving handouts only perpetuates the problem. Now he was watching a woman who clearly had nothing share her only clean possession with a stranger. Maria stood up quickly, wiping her face to hide a stubborn tear. Her stomach growled, loud enough for Noah to hear, reminding her that she had traded her last meal from the shelter for that clean handkerchief after hearing that an infection had spread among the homeless in the area. "Dad!" Noah finally spotted Richard and ran toward him. "Look, that lady helped me." Richard stepped forward, awkward in his normally confident stance. Maria was already backing away quickly, as if she knew the usual reaction to her presence. "Wait!" Richard called, but she had already disappeared into the crowd. Noah tugged at his father's coat sleeve. "She was hungry, Dad. I heard her stomach growling." That night, as rain pounded the streets of Manhattan, Maria huddled under the small awning of a service entrance, dreaming of what her life could have been if that job interview 3 years ago hadn't ended with a human resources director saying that her profile didn't fit the company's image, the same director who, coincidentally, now appeared on billboards as the new VP of Diversity at Hayes Enterprises. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Richard Hayes was using all his power and resources to find her, driven by something he hadn't felt in years, shame for who he had become, and a determination to change it. If this story of kindness and indifference touched your heart, be sure to sign up to find out how a simple act of humanity would spark a revolution that no one, not even the most powerful man in New York, could have predicted. 3 days passed as Maria faced a new blow. The shelter where she occasionally got a bed had been closed for emergency renovations, a common euphemism when authorities wanted to remove homeless people from high-value areas before important events. "You have 20 minutes to get your belongings," announced a police officer with feigned indifference. "But where are we supposed to go?" asked an elderly woman standing next to Maria. "That's not my problem," he replied, checking his watch. "The nearest shelter is 10 kilometers away." Maria gathered her meager possessions, a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, a worn toothbrush, a tattered diary, and a cheap makeup kit she used for job interviews that never led to work. That's when Julian Davis, a social worker who frequented the shelter, tapped her on the shoulder. "Maria, the Fresh Start Foundation is hiring people with experience living on the streets for a new program. It pays." He handed her a card with an address on it. "Why me?" she asked skeptically. "Because you have something that can't be taught, dignity under pressure," he replied. "Besides, I saw your resume when you applied for the housing program, bachelor's degree in business, 3 years of HR experience before all this." The next morning, soaked by persistent rain, Maria showed up at the address she had been given. The receptionist didn't even look up when she entered, dripping onto the freshly waxed floor. "Can I help you?" she asked coldly. "I'm here about the job with the Restart Foundation. Julian Davis referred me." The receptionist's expression instantly changed to contempt. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" A female voice interjected. "She's exactly where she should be." Dr. Elena Stone, the foundation's executive director, appeared with a confident posture and an impeccable blazer, extending her hand without hesitation. In her simple office, without the ostentation typical of NGOs that spent more on appearances than on results, Elena explained, "Our mission is more than just getting people off the streets. It's to expose the system that puts them there in the first place." The conversation was interrupted by Julian's arrival with a thick folder. "I was finishing up my research on Hayes Enterprises." The name struck Maria like a bolt of lightning. "Hayes? Richard Hayes?" Maria confirmed. Billionaire, self-proclaimed philanthropist, and ironically, one of the biggest investors in urban revitalization projects that drive vulnerable communities out of their homes. "Our next campaign will focus on the inconsistencies between his public image and his corporate policies." Fate had a peculiar sense of humor, the father of the boy she had helped days ago. "Why are you telling me this?" Maria asked. "Because we need someone who knows the reality of the streets but also understands the corporate world. Someone who can expose the hypocrisy." What Maria didn't reveal was her brief encounter with Hayes' son. Something told her to keep that information to herself. In the weeks that followed, as she collected testimonials from people displaced by Hayes Enterprises projects, Maria noticed something strange. The same black car often appeared wherever she went. More than once, she felt like she was being watched. In his luxurious apartment, Mr. Richard Hayes examined reports on the foundation, discovering with growing discomfort that his corporate policies were directly on the organization's radar. Noah, playing in the next room, kept asking about the lady with the scarf. "Did you find her, Daddy?" "Not yet, champ, but I'm getting close." During her research, Maria found a familiar name in the records: James Roberts, current Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Hayes Enterprises. The same man who 3 years earlier had rejected her application with the excuse that she didn't fit the corporate culture, the same man who, according to current employees, systematically vetoed minority candidates for leadership positions while building a facade of inclusivity. Her tattered journal wasn't just a vending ground, it was a meticulous record of a broken system, seen through the eyes of someone who had experienced it in its rawest form: names, dates, subtly coded discriminatory comments she had received in dozens of job interviews. And now, with the foundation's resources, these observations were beginning to take shape as concrete evidence. What no one realized, as Maria and Richard's paths inevitably converged, was how a simple worn backpack carried the seeds that could bring down an empire. While he searched for her, driven by a belated conscience, she quietly compiled the dossier that would expose the fundamental contradictions of a system he had helped build. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't those with power. They're those with nothing left to lose. Hayes Enterprises' annual Diversity and Inclusion Conference was the most hypocritical event in the corporate world. According to Maria, in that luxurious auditorium, under soft lights and inspiring banners proclaiming innovation through diversity, hundreds of executives applauded as James Roberts took the stage. As Director of Diversity, he proclaimed, displaying flawless graphics on the big screen, "I am pleased to announce that our company has increased the hiring of professionals from minority groups by 75% in the last year." In the back row, Maria discreetly recorded everything with a small device provided by the foundation. Her presence there as a representative of a partner NGO had been carefully orchestrated by Elena after weeks of meticulous preparation. Richard Hayes watched the event from the right side of the stage, uncomfortable. Since meeting Noah, something in him had changed. His investigations into Maria had led him to discover not only about her quest but also about the questionable practices of his own company. Now, Roberts continued, "I am proud to invite representatives from our partner organizations to a panel on social inclusion." Maria took a deep breath and walked toward the stage along with 3 other representatives. When Roberts saw her, his smile faltered for a second, so brief that only someone looking for that reaction would have noticed. "Welcome," he said, controlling his voice. "We'll start with a brief introduction from each organization." When it was Maria's turn, she stood up calmly. "My name is Maria Vance. 3 years ago, I had an interview at this company for the HR department." An uncomfortable silence settled. This wasn't the agreed-upon script. "At the time, Mr. Roberts informed me that my profile didn't fit the company image." Her voice remained steady. 3 months later, I lost my apartment. 6 months later, I was on the streets." Roberts coughed nervously. "I think we're getting off topic." "On the streets," Maria continued, as if uninterrupted, "I kept a detailed journal of every person in a situation similar to mine, former skilled professionals, mostly Black and Latino, rejected for not fitting in with corporate cultures." Richard Hayes sat up straight in his chair, finally recognizing who this woman was. The same woman who had helped Noah. The same woman he had been looking for weeks. While Hayes Enterprises proclaims inclusion, Maria continued, pressing a button on her cell phone, "Its executives speak a different language in private." On the big screen, a video appeared, James Roberts at an internal meeting, laughing as he said, "Sure, we need diversity in our promotional brochures, but not necessarily in the boardroom." Another clip showed the same man commenting, "Put some color in the lower levels to meet quotas, but keep the strategic core." "You know." Murmurs in the auditorium grew louder. Roberts turned pale. That's edited. Completely out of context." "I have the full recordings," Maria replied calmly, "as well as documents showing how, under his leadership, 89% of qualified Black candidates were rejected with the same vague justification used on me." The screen now displayed a series of internal emails, messages, and evaluation forms with clear patterns of discrimination. Richard stood up and walked toward the stage with determined steps. Roberts, sweating, looked frantically between Maria and his boss. "Mr. Hayes, this is clearly an attempt to silence." Richard interrupted, his voice echoing through the microphone. For a moment, Maria feared he was there to defend him. Instead, he turned to the audience. "As CEO of Hayes Enterprises, I take full responsibility for these failures. Not just policy failures, but moral failures." The entire auditorium froze. Richard Hayes never admitted mistakes publicly. "Miss Vance," he continued, looking directly at Maria, "you have shown us today the true meaning of courage and integrity, qualities that, ironically, we claim to value in this company." Roberts tried to slip away discreetly, but Richard held him back by the arm. "James Roberts is officially relieved of his duties, effective immediately. And tomorrow, we will begin a full audit of all our hiring and promotion practices." Turning to Maria, he said more quietly, "And I have a personal debt to you that I'd like to discuss in private." Backstage, after the conference descended into chaos, Richard found Maria organizing her notes. "Noah asks about you every day," he said simply. She looked at him, surprised. "How did you?" "My son insists that you're the scarf lady. The scarf you used to wipe his bruise. I've been looking for you for weeks." As Hayes's corporate empire underwent an earthquake of change in the weeks that followed, with high-profile layoffs and complete restructurings, few realized the true irony of the situation. The man who had built his empire preaching meritocracy finally understood that true merit came not from accumulated privilege, but from resilience forged in adversity. What no one could have predicted was how that confrontation would transform not only Maria's life or the policies of Hayes Enterprises, but fundamentally the heart of a man who for the first time saw clearly the world beyond his bubble of privilege. And as the consequences of this public revelation spread like ripples across the corporate world, one question remained: what would happen when the boy Noah discovered that his hero and the scarf lady had much more in common than anyone could have imagined? 6 months after the conference that rocked the corporate world, Forbes magazine published a story titled, "The Hayes Transformation: How a Homeless Woman Revolutionized an Empire." The cover story featured Maria Vance, now Director of Social Impact at Hayes Enterprises, alongside Richard Hayes at a housing project developed by the company. "The first time I saw Maria, she was helping my son while I stood by, paralyzed," Richard said in the interview. "At that moment, she was invisible to the corporate world I represented. Today, she is the most important voice at our decision-making table." Hayes's new job training center, located exactly where the shelter had been closed for renovations, now offered temporary housing, training, and guaranteed employment for people in vulnerable situations. The program, named Project Handkerchief at Noah's suggestion, had already reintegrated more than 200 people into the workforce. Meanwhile, James Roberts faced a lawsuit filed by former employees and discriminated job applicants. His career was effectively over. No reputable company would risk hiring him after revelations of systematic discriminatory conduct. In an irony not lost on social media, he was now looking for work using the same system he had manipulated against others for years. "Prejudice has a cost that goes far beyond morale," Maria explained in a TED Talk that would go viral. "When companies reject talent based on appearance, race, or background, they don't just destroy individual lives, they compromise their own potential for innovation and growth." The partnership between the Fresh Start Foundation and Hayes Enterprises became a model studied in business schools. Dr. Elena Stone, now a regular advisor to the company's board of directors, often joked, "They tried to buy us to silence us. We ended up buying their soul, and it was worth a lot more than we realized." One fall afternoon, while overseeing the opening of a new community space, Maria received an unexpected message. A woman who had recently been welcomed into the program wrote, "You don't know me, but 3 years ago, you gave me the last piece of your sandwich at a shelter. You said I needed it more than you did. I never forgot. Today, I'm next in line to start over." The chain of kindness Maria had started, even in her most difficult moments, was now multiplying through lives she had never imagined touching. At home, yes, she now had a home of her own. Maria kept framed a small handkerchief she had used to wipe Noah's knee, now washed and stored as a symbol of a transformation impossible to predict. Noah, now with self-assigned responsibilities in Project Handkerchief, often accompanied Maria on her visits to the centers. "When I grow up," he confided to her one day, "I want to help people like you do." "You already do," Maria replied. "Do you know how?" he asked, curious. "By seeing people that others pretend not to see." Richard, watching from afar as his son interacted with the woman who had completely redefined his values, reflected on how a single moment of indecision, those seconds he had hesitated before intervening when Maria helped Noah, had changed the course of countless lives, including his own. "There's a lesson I learned from all this," Richard shared during a charity dinner that raised millions for social housing. "Privilege isn't just what you have, but what you've never had to think about. I spent decades building walls to protect my fortune when I should have been building bridges to share opportunities." The real transformation, however, was in the small details. Richard now knew the names of every maintenance worker. Noah shared his lunch with less fortunate colleagues. And Maria? Maria now carried not just a journal of injustices, but a strategic plan to systematically correct them. "Some people ask me if I feel satisfied that I won," Maria said during an interview. But this was never a battle to win or lose. It was about restoring balance. The real victory isn't in defeating your opponents, but in turning them into allies. The story of a woman who went from the sidewalk to the boardroom resonated far beyond the borders of New York. In schools, businesses, and communities, the Maria effect inspired a new approach to diversity, not as a statistical obligation, but as a strategic advantage and moral imperative. On her one-year anniversary with the company, Maria received an unusual gift from Richard and Noah, a small box containing a new, immaculately white handkerchief, with a simple note, "For the next new beginning." Her eyes filled with tears as she realized the depth of the gesture. It wasn't just a symbol of how her life had changed, it was a reminder that genuine transformation always begins with simple acts of humanity, even when the whole world seems to have turned its back on you. That night, gazing at the city that had once rejected her and now celebrated her, Maria understood that true justice isn't about punishing those who make mistakes, but about creating a world where those mistakes become increasingly difficult to make and increasingly easy to correct. And as the lights of Manhattan sparkled against the night sky, a simple truth hung in the air: sometimes the most revolutionary act is not to tear down empires, but to transform them from the inside out, with the same kindness with which you clean a stranger's scraped knee. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect on the transformative power of small gestures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that reveal how true greatness often hides in the most unlikely corners of society, and how the best revenge against an unjust system is to rebuild it with your own values.